Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the final 3 sessions on 1 John. I hope that you have enjoyed your time reflecting on this wonderful letter. It's truly a fascinating read and gives us much insight into how we deal with one another as the people of God. I want to apologise again for the delay in this reflection. This time last week, we had a medical emergency within the wider family. My thanks to all who have sent prayers and best wishes. All is good now, so thank you so much. Today, in these first 5 verses of chapter 5, we get a reframing of John's earlier argument. Because we have covered much of this already, there is only one aspect of this passage that we really need to reflect on in any detail. So let's listen to these verses together. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world, except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? Verses 1 to 5 are the proper conclusion to the main argument of the letter. Verses 6 to 21 have other purposes, and we'll spend the next 2 weeks reflecting on them. But here is the proper summation of the letter. The summation of the letter is that everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, will keep the commands, which are not burdensome, will love the members of the community of faith, which is the children of God, and will not be contaminated by the world. While it's taken John a while to get to this point, the message is quite simple. Believe that Jesus has been sent by God. Here John speaks of it in terms of being born of God. Therefore, just as Jesus is born of God, those who believe this are likewise born of God, just as Jesus is. And this is all about faith. While we're able to love, that love is to be rooted in God. However, that love is grounded in the faith about who Jesus is. And any love that we might show, if it's not grounded in this belief, then it is not rooted in God, because we cannot be born of God if we do not love in the manner that God commands. All this we have already covered. However, there seems to be a new thought in verse 4 and 5, which we will look at here, and that is the idea that those who have been born of God, as we've already reflected, will overcome the world. Now, it's true we've heard overcome very briefly in chapter 2 when John was writing to the young ones in the community. But what on earth does overcoming the world mean? Glad you asked. Very good question. Put simply, overcoming the world is not about defeating it as an army might defeat another army or as a nation might conquer another nation. It's not that. It means to successfully live in God's way rather than allowing ourselves to be at the mercy and whims and priorities of a rebellious world which is at odds with God and God's plan. So what does this mean? And what might this look like for us today? The first way we might look at this issue is to look at the life of Jesus. He is the perfect example for us, isn't he? When we look at Jesus' life, he did not conform to the pattern of living that was expected of him as a Jewish rabbi of his day. He ate with sinners and tax collectors. He forgave people their sins. He allowed women of dodgy character to pour ointment on him and to wipe his feet with their tears. He touched lepers and dead people. He raised the dead. He also called people to a radical way of living. This radical way of living we call the Sermon on the Mount, and it's to be found in chapters 5 to 7 of the Gospel of Matthew. We'll not go over this in any detail at all. Suffice to say that Jesus challenged the people of his day, and therefore us, to live a life that is so radical that it cannot help but be attractive to others, as well as repulsive to others as well, by the way. He calls us to have an attitude to other people that seeks to love and care for them, and not to see them as a means for our economic, social, or personal advantage. He calls us to look at each person as made in the image and likeness of God, and to thus treat each person with integrity and give each person the opportunity to reach their full potential. Probably the most radical innovation of Jesus was that he would invite people to join him first. Then, second, he would teach them, and third, they would then believe in a certain way. We see this in the person of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, don't we? Ah, Zacchaeus, I must come and dine with you in your house. And so Zacchaeus goes into the house and he joins with Jesus and he encounters Jesus. And then he has a radical transformation of behavior that just completely amazes everybody who knew Zacchaeus. The people of Jesus' day wanted people, alternatively, to behave a certain way, learn certain things that they would then agree on, and then they could join. But Jesus, as exemplified in his encounter with Zacchaeus, turns this whole behavior and process on its head. This is in stark contrast to the world of Jesus' day. People in that day were exploited socially, economically, and personally. Zacchaeus was a great example of that. But he was totally changed his attitude as a result of his encounter with Jesus. People deemed as sinners, like Zacchaeus, were not given the time of day. No wonder they exploited everybody, and therefore not treated as being made in the image and likeness of God. Today, the situation is not that different. People are still exploited socially, economically, and personally. This occurs sadly even within the church. If people do not look like us, while they might not be obviously shunned, they are certainly made to feel unwelcome. If people do not believe in a manner we approve of, they are likewise treated. People are expected to behave in a certain manner, learn certain things and agree to them, and then they can join us. But this is not the way of Jesus. We get these ideals from the world, and therefore we have become compromised with the world. One of the ways I think that we've become compromised in the world is the issue of image. It's probably the biggest issue that we have in our church. We have put ourselves out as being this place of safety and inclusion. However, a royal commission and other behaviours of the church tells the world, and many in the church, by the way, that the church is not a safe place for people to be. We've hidden our dirty secrets for too long, and the proverbial chickens are coming home to roost, or have come home to roost. We've taken on the practices of the world to have image makers try and change how people perceive us without much success, and all it does is simply paper over the cracks and makes us feel like we're doing something without actually doing anything. And so we've actually conformed to the image and likeness of the world, but we haven't conformed to the image and likeness of God. We've then taken on the process of the world, other processes of the world like professional standards, which are excellent ideas, and I'm glad we've taken them on, but we've implemented them terribly, and those processes have actually become abusive in themselves. We've engaged in stock market activity like the world, which sometimes has been exploitative, and we have gotten burnt by it. We have made declarations that we are the true church and others are not the true church, or inferior brothers or sisters, even distant relations. We, like the world, have gone to war within our church over our differences. It is not just the wider church where this has happened, and we've had such failures, but also in the local church. Interpersonal conflicts, rivalries, dissensions, and the like. This is ultimately why 1 John is such a powerful letter to the church even today, because John is speaking to a time when these sorts of things were happening in the church, and we still haven't improved. We haven't seemed to have moved on from it in over 2,000 years. So, have we really overcome the world, as John says that we can, in verses 4 and 5 of chapter 5? I think the translation of the verb into English, to overcome, from the Greek, is unhelpful. I think a better translation of the Greek verb is something like this: to be more than. So we might translate verses 4 and 5 this way: for everyone who has been born of God is more than the world. And this is the victory that has become more than the world, our faith. Who is it that is more than the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? Sounds a bit different, doesn't it? When you go back and look at the behaviour of the church over the years with regards to this translation, I would have to say the church is not more than the world in many places. And in fact, in many places, it is indistinguishable from the world. Such a translation recognises the reality of Jesus' words to the disciples in the upper room, that they will be in the world, but not of the world. They and we, who are inheritors and who believe Jesus is the Son of God, will be more than the world. This is because we need to recognise that the church has to sit in the world, but not be of the world. It has to be more than the world. All the scandals, all the ineptitude of the leadership in the church has caused it to become weak and insipid in many places in our world. There are, to be sure, bright spots, but they are few and far between. And it seems to me that this is possibly because much of the church, despite what it professes publicly, does not necessarily really believe that Jesus is the Son of God, raised from the dead. Coupled with that, despite people saying that we love the Father and all those who are born of God, that is, who are the children of God, whoever they might be, there is some people who actually are the children of God, who we, for whatever reason, still think are a bit dodgy. We have satisfied ourselves that we are right about such people, for we have quarried out of the Bible the appropriate passages to back our claim, and have made the claim that such people are not of God. And despite saying we still love them, all our actions clearly demonstrate that we do not love them. Such actions leave us falling short, according to John in his letter, and we may not truly have the love of God in us, for we do not truly love the children of God. This will leave us subject to the world, and we will not be able to overcome the world or be more than the world, and therefore subject to the final outcome of the world that rejects God. The reality is, we will always live in that tension of being on the border between the world, which is anti-God, and God's world. We live in that liminal space between the two worlds, and sometimes we will be more in one than the other. Does this mean that we despair or worry about this reality? I don't think so. I think John, in this part of the letter, as he is wrapping everything up, is recognizing that his words earlier might cause despair. How can we possibly do all of this? Because we're actually in this liminal space between the two worlds. But he is saying these words which become words of encouragement to us, to the readers. If you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, then you will be more than the world, because you will have eternal life. What is more, this eternal life will be determined by God, not by the church or by humans in the church, but by God. So be of good cheer. Are you being persecuted by the world or the church? Are you being distressed by the world or the church? If you believe Jesus is the Son of God, then you are more than the world. You have overcome. While it is preferable that we live our lives free of conflict or difficulty, it is not possible to do that always. What is possible is that we can overcome. We can be more than the world by our faith that Jesus is the Son of God. And in loving God, we love the children of God, that is, all the people. And in doing this, we become agents of change and transformation in a world that desperately needs it. The Lord be with you.